Podcast Playlist.
You were listening to Podcast Playlist, a podcast about podcasts, where I, Brendan Hutchins, share what I've been listening to and why you should listen too. And today, of course, we're not doing that. I had the immense pleasure of speaking with Kevin from DiscoverPods.com, Arielle from the Earbuds Podcast Collective, and Phoebe from the New York Times Podcast Club Facebook group. We discussed the 2017 Discover Pods Awards, our favorite podcasts, our listening habits, and we select the winners of the 2017 Mount Rushmore of podcasting. Final voting is now open for the Discover Pods Awards, so head to discoverpods.com or use the direct link in the show notes to the voting page. Before we jump in, you can support this show and get $10 off your first order at Blue Bottle Coffee if you use the link in the show notes, bluebottlecoffee.com/u/podcast playlist. This is some of the best coffee I've ever had. They source it from around the world, roast it, and ship it to you within 24 hours, and it's super fresh. Go to bluebottlecoffee.com/u/podcast playlist. Link in the show notes, and you can get $10 off and support this show. Now to the panel. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me for this roundtable discussion. Thank you, Kevin, for putting out the inaugural Discover Pods Awards. That's pretty great. I'm really glad that you started with that and that we could highlight a bunch of different podcasts that maybe have been underlooked or are overrated or underrated, all that kind of stuff. So let's go around and introduce ourselves. Kevin, we'll start with you since you started the awards. Who are you and what do you do in the podcast world?
Sure. I'm Kevin, the founder and editor of Discover Pods, discoverpods.com. And today we're here to discuss the inaugural Discover Pods Awards, kind of discuss the merits of who's deserving, who might get snubbed, and specifically the Mount Rushmore of podcasts.
Hi, my name is Arielle Nissenblatt. I started Earbuds Podcast Collective, and I'm now the founder and the lead curator. And what we do is listen to 5 different podcasts each week according to a theme, and each theme is curated by a different person from within the podcast world. So I have a pretty broad understanding and listening list each week, and yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, awesome! And I love getting that email each week in my inbox. And
I'm so glad.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm Phoebe. I work for the New York Times opinion section, but in my copious spare time, I manage our weekly podcast club, which picks a new buzzy podcast of the week and discusses it throughout and votes on it at the end, not in my today.
Very cool. Very cool. And I also got to say that I love your Twitter feed.
Oh my God.
It is one of the most heartbreaking, but also mind-opening Twitter feeds that I follow. And it always gets me thinking about things that I should be, and my mind often strays from. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. That's really kind of you. I totally use it to procrastinate. So that makes it sound a lot more thoughtful than it actually should be.
You're just throwing stats out there that should be on the minds of more people, I think. But we're here to talk about podcasts. So what are the podcasts that maybe you would call your core podcasts that maybe you always catch the episodes of, or your favorites? Kevin, let's start with you. Maybe like your top 3 or 5, just the things that you always go to.
Geez, that's a tough order. I kind of break my podcast listening to 2 categories. There's the evergreen stuff. So those are stories and topics that if I listen to a week from now, a month from now, maybe even a year from now, they'll still be timely and I won't be missing things. And then there's the more rapid response things. So those are anything having to do with current events, local news, sports, anything that really has some urgency to it. So to break those down and kind of give you a couple of each, in the evergreen, it's the staples, 99% Invisible, 20,000 Hertz, Marc Maron, things like that. In the daily, the rapid response things, I like the daily podcasts such as The Daily and Up First. I'm really into sports, so a lot of the stuff that The Ringer is putting out, whether it's NBA, NFL season, things like that.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, and Arielle, same question. What are your go-tos?
I start out every morning. I wake up, turn my phone on, The Daily Up First, then I jump in the shower. Then when I get out of the shower, I listen to the podcast that is for that day for earbuds. So really it could be all over the place. But that's my experimental time in the morning. And then throughout the week, I'll also hit This American Life, Strangers, of course, a long form podcast, Fresh Air. And then my big one this week that I've been really loving is Sound Opinions.
Nice. That's a good one. Awesome. And Phoebe, same to you.
I, like Arielle, have a schedule every day. And if I don't start my day with the audio of Rachel Maddow's show the night before, I feel like I won't be ahead of all my colleagues on like whatever the scoop is. So I hit that one, and then I do the daily, and then Up First. And from there, I'll listen to any of the like more talky politics shows, which will be, of course, the Crooked Media slate. But most that it's not my favorite. Second to NPR Politics, and then I'll kind of work my way through all of the most recent briefings of politics until the end of the day. And then I hit the shows that I have to listen to, which like are not political at all, more fiction and comedy. So like today I was waiting all day to listen to Comedy Bang Bang because it's Monday, and then Spontaneous Nation because it's Monday. Depends on the day.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing.
What about
you? For me, pretty similar. I have my morning routine of the daily Rachel Maddow Daily Tech News Show headlines and macOS Ken. Those are like the four that always pop up because they like post either late the previous night or super early in the morning. I'm very into both politics and tech, so those are kind of the main things. But then at the top of my priority list of my podcasts, whenever they come out, they just go right to the top. Besides my own shows, which I like to listen to way too much, Harmontown is my comedy staple. Bonanza is it's a show on Relay FM that it started out as a tech conversation and became a comedy podcast. And Cortex, which is CGP Grey, the YouTuber, and Relay FM's Mike Hurley, talking about productivity and tech and stuff like that. So what are the standout podcasts that have started in 2017 that you really loved, that maybe you'd go back to, that stood out to you in some way? Kevin, let's start with you.
All right. I think it's tough because 2017 was such a growing year, as every consecutive year has been with podcasts. So even going back to, like Phoebe mentioned, just the Crooked Media slate coming out of the ringers, keeping it 1600. So the Pod Save America, Pod Save the People, all of those.
Yes.
For me, I was late to the game with Ear Hustle, but I've thought it was fantastic.
That's one of mine too.
Season 2 of Revisionist History was great. I don't know if that's considered a new podcast.
Yeah.
Mogul was fantastic. Oh, wow. It's tough. Dirty John, and I think we'd be remiss without mentioning S-Town.
Of course. Yeah, Arielle, how about you?
Yeah, happy to jump in. The way I get a lot of the new podcasts that I listen to is through the newsletters that I get. So I don't know if you've heard of This Is Not My First Radio. The person who curates that list looks for standout episodes, and a lot of times they're from newly produced podcasts.
Oh, nice.
So I have found Family Ghosts. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's really wonderful. It's through Panoply.
That one won the Panoply, right?
Yes, yeah.
It was the pilot.
So that's really great. I also recently found the Fatherly podcast. It has a lot of great interviews with fathers.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know if this, actually, I think this is late 2016, but Presidents Are People Too was really fun for me.
Oh, right. Yes. That was a cool series. How about you, Phoebe?
Well, as I said, Ear Hustle it is on my list, but I did not put it under Best New Podcast. I put that under the most innovative podcast. Because I scrolled it out on the train today. What I thought each one should be. I just got into First Aid Kit, which I think is from BuzzFeed. And
I love that one.
That's a new one that recently came into the world. And I just have been waiting for every single episode as it comes out, because it just centers and plays with and like respects and indulges, but also laughs at female thirst, and it's beautiful, and I don't know. I think it's fantastic, and it's very much about the female gaze, and it's dope and funny. Also, I feel like a lot of really interesting feminist podcasts came out of the last year. Maybe going a little bit closer to the election, but this has been a really interesting year for angry feminists on the radio waves. So I'm a big fan of Misandry with Marsha and Ray and the Hellbent podcast. I think both of those are good listening for when you want to feel angry at the patriarchy.
This came up for me in so many of the categories. It's Been a Minute with Sam Sanders was amazing for me. So he disappeared from NPR Politics podcast, and everybody was like, where's he going? Where's he going? And, then on the very active Twitter sphere, he started posting, something's coming. Get excited. What should the title be? And then all of a sudden this bomb podcast came out, and it was in a good way, bomb in a good way. And every week, twice a week, I'm extremely entertained. So I just had to mention that.
Nice. You're at Brendan.
Yeah. So I like, first of all, the listeners of Podcast Playlist do not need to hear me talk about S-Town any more than they already have. So we'll get that out of the way. That one's very standout for me. I like a lot of true crime stuff, so to speak. I mean, I can get really overwhelmed with it, but 74 Seconds, I felt like they did an amazing job at covering the Philando Castile traumatic event. And it was so great to hear that reporting in that way, and it felt really carefully done. A couple that are super brand new. The Impact by Vox, covering healthcare in a really I don't want to say like unique way, because it's really just a podcast to just displaying the information, but it seems so personal and really good stories in the way that display the healthcare system. And then the Vocal Fries, which is two ladies. They talk about how people speak, not just women, but it's a lot focused on women, or at least how women are yelled at for the way that they speak, which is just mind-boggling. But each episode, they go into a certain type of way that people speak. The first one was all about Vocal Fry, which is, kind of what the name comes from. And it was super, super fun series. Immensely loved the No series by The Heart this year.
That's not new.
So good.
You're jumping. Well,
okay. I'm taking 2017. I mean, like it was the 2017 series of The Heart.
That's true. Fair enough. Mini series.
yeah. The feed is not new, but also another one that just started is Whiting Wongs, which
what?
Whiting Wongs. So it's
okay. That's what you said.
Yeah, it's as bad as it sounds. Yeah, I mean, but it's in a good way. So it's Dan Harmon from the writer of Community, Rick and Morty, and host of Harmontown. He is joined by Jessica Gao, who is a writer on Rick and Morty, and they talk about racism and sexism in writing for TV.
Interesting.
And it is illuminating. I mean, on one hand, it's everything that you expect, because the industry is just completely racist and sexist.
Yeah.
But it also dives into some of the details about interactions and what could be done better really well.
I mean, Dan Harmon's shows are not necessarily the pinnacle of those things. Do they talk about his own work?
No. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, he goes into all of his mistakes. Or maybe not all of his mistakes, but he definitely goes into his mistakes. And
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Harmon fan, but Rick and Morty season 1 was like the women were made of cardboard for most of the season. But it got much better season 2. So interesting. Ooh.
Yeah, season 3 it actually has half male, half female writers, and the first episode of Whiting Wrongs actually goes into the therapist in Pickle Rick, and how that character was written and how that character just totally tore Rick apart, because that was actually written by Jessica. And
this is so cool.
That was a great one. Yeah, it was super fun.
I'm so excited.
The last standout for me from 2017 is What Trump Can Teach Us About Con Law, which is just a great way to twist what...
That was fantastic. I'll definitely give a +1 to that.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to go into this or not, but I just thought I would throw it out there. Are there any disappointments of 2017 where you were hyped up for a new podcast that was coming out, but it did not turn out to be the way that you expected?
I don't know about a new podcast, but I was really thrown off by this season of Invisibilia.
I second that.
They they opened the season branding it like what did they call it?
A concept album.
Concept album, and then I never really saw that to fruition in a satisfying way. And even the science in some of it was like not necessarily correct. I don't know. It's just really odd and not what I expected. But Lulu Miller was gone from that one, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a good suggestion.
One that I've seen get a lot of votes that I was scratching my head at was Missing Richard Simmons. Maybe it just wasn't for me, but I thought it was kind of anticlimactic, and just in terms of best new pods of 2017, so many others jumped to mind before.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think for Missing Richard Simmons, it read like a true crime story, which is why so many people were into it, or it sounded like a true crime story.
Agreed.
And I don't know if any of you were at Podcast Movement, but Dan Taberski spoke there, and I think he even mentioned this. He was interviewed by Katie Couric on her podcast, Katie Couric, where he mentioned that when he started it out, he did not know how it was going to end. So the end just happened to be not a very journalistically pleasing end.
Yeah.
I saw him speak at a panel on documentary podcasting hosted by Nick Blah in New York, and he was trying to film a documentary on
I remember hearing that
Richard Simmons, and then Richard Simmons was a part of the project, but then suddenly pulled away, and then it became this podcast, and that added this uncomfortable inner journalist in me that was just like, this is felt like a tabloid, which is a little bit how Dirty John felt, to be honest. But
for me, disappointments, I didn't listen to Missing Richard Simmons because it didn't grab me, the premise or the idea of it. And
he didn't miss anything.
But Dirty John, I couldn't get halfway through the first episode. Yes. I just could not relate to anybody in except for the kids, I guess. And I just felt bad for them. But so that one was kind of a disappointment to me. And I guess I can't really say too much about it because I didn't actually listen to it all. But
no, you didn't. You were right. I agree. I think it's.
Oh, okay.
It was really interesting how big it got, and I think that just speaks to how compelling true crime is in this medium. Over.
Yep.
I mean, it was a journalist, a print journalist, who just after the fact went and interviewed the people who were the subjects for audio, but he had already done all the first interviews, which is why it sounded like it was coming out of a can. I think it just sounded like they were had already said these things, and it wasn't as emotional.
I actually at first thought that it was not true crime. I thought it was fake crime.
I mean, that would have been probably more well done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd post to the group is, for some reason, and this could just be anecdotal, I just feel like true crime lends itself to such, I guess, the power of word of mouth, whether it's a podcast or, a short documentary like James, like that. You just see it spread so viral so fast that I just don't see with other categories or genres as much.
Yeah. I think the popularity of My Favorite Murder speaks to there's something about this subject and this medium. I don't know. I think people are always fascinated with true crime, but because you're not limited to having to watch a screen, you can kind of get it everywhere. Maybe people are just scary monsters.
Yeah, very possible.
Seems true.
My other disappointment for 2017 kind of speaking of, fake true crime, is showcased by Radiotopia, specifically the Playl.ist conspiracy. I mean, because it's a fake story posing as a real mystery, and not only do I not like that it's sort of trying to be like a Blair Witch or whatever, it's some weird thing that, it's posing as real, but it's actually fake.
Did it reference audio too much? Like, did it reference itself as an audio piece too much? Because that was what was so disappointing about 36 Questions, which I should have included on this list. Because I was really excited about because I'm a total dweeb. I'm really excited about musical podcasts, but the character building was not great, but like I was just turned off every time they referenced the fact that they were holding a recorder, and like you don't have to justify that the way like television sitcoms don't have to justify why they're talking out to the audience. It's like
the cameras, The Playl.ist conspiracy, I guess they do kind of mention it a lot because they talk a lot about how it was going to be a video series, and then because they were going to have a Kickstarter, and then it failed, so they decided to record it, and then Radiotopia picked it up. And I don't know, it's just weird. I almost love every Radiotopia show except this, and it just really disappointed me. So, all right, well, let's get to talking about the Mount Rushmore of podcasting. So this is going to be since there's 4 of us and 4 spots on the mountain, I don't know if we all want to pick one or we want to kind of debate all of our different options and decide together who the top 4 should be.
How about we all mention our top 4 and then see if there are any crossovers? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead, Arielle.
I've got Helen Zaltzman, Sam Sanders, Al Letson, and Kelly McEvers.
Nice.
Yeah. I had Sam Sanders, so.
Wow.
The only one that I wrote down immediately and really wanted, but then was like, shit, he's a white, he's a white guy.
No, you can swear.
It was Paul F. Tompkins, because he is an OG of the format, and he's been on so many podcast episodes and has had so many of his own that, and just was my entree into podcasting in general. So personally, his work. Plus he's Pod F. Tompkins.
Yeah, it's a great pick.
That's a good pick. The one person that I had circled when this came out was Bill Simmons for kind of similar reasons. And I know this might be basic white guy of me for saying, but being an OG, like you said, of podcasting is big, but also he built The Ringer, a new media company with podcasts as a crucial aspect of that. Whereas other media companies see podcasting as an additional avenue and they kind of add that on top. This was probably by circumstance, because The Ringer is a relatively new media, was just an interesting way to see them packaged together, really text, video, and podcasting as, 3-punch. So I have him plus the talent that he's surrounded. We talked about the Crooked Media people, just them spawning off of Bill Simmons, and, Wesley Morris is another, just some excellent talent. So he deserves a spot in my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm not a big sports guy, but I can definitely see his impact. For me, I have a pretty shameful white guy list, but my immediate 4, or my curated 4, I guess, are Michael Barbaro, Jeremy Scahill, Alex Bloomberg, and Dallas Taylor.
So many white
Your groans.
So many white guys.
I know. I feel awful about
it.
But
it's okay. You like what you like.
Yeah.
I thought about this problem of too many white guys. So I added Phoebe Robinson, who shows so many white guys, and who really got her comedic name out there using podcasts. And also Glenn Washington, who has done a lot in the field, in Anna Sale maybe.
Very cool. All right. So we have 2 votes for Helen and Sam. So that seems pretty good so far.
Do we even need to defend it?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what has Helen Zaltzman done this year to be on? Because, at least, Kevin, the way that you've proposed the question is it's the 2017 Mount Rushmore podcasting, as in maybe there might be one every year, and not necessarily the one that's set in stone for generations. Is this going to be like a this year thing, or is this kind of like the staples of forever?
That's a good question, because, I mean, admittedly, when you pose the question, it's, should we choose 4 people based on historical context, similar to the actual Mount Rushmore? But like you said, it is the 2017 awards. So I kind of, because the inaugural, I feel like we shouldn't limit it to just their 2017 accomplishments. Okay. But that said, if we make it extremely fluid, I guess that would devalue it. So I guess let's kind of judge the merits from the beginning of time until now. And then we cross the road when it happens in the future.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
So yeah, Helen Zaltzman would be a great example. I mean, not only does she have a wonderful podcast that is revered by many, but she also hosts or curates
podcaster hangout group, support group.
Yeah, that's the one. Support group. Yep. On Facebook. And she does a great job keeping everybody sane in there, letting them, getting people support and stuff. So that's a super good cause, and I think worthy of recognition.
So the one thing that I kind of looked at in terms of criteria was the people that other podcasters model themselves after, or that are kind of pushing the boundaries. So I don't want to hamper on your pick, Brendan, but if you choose somebody like Dallas Taylor, for instance, and obviously I'm on the record of loving 20,000 Hertz, and I had a great conversation with him earlier this year, but he himself admits that he likes to model the production value and the storytelling after 99% Invisible and Roman Mars.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that's, a notch in Roman's cap, or how you want to kind of play that against each other.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And Dallas Taylor for me was, on my short list for 2017, because new to the game. Yeah, for all time, definitely Roman Mars would be high up on the list, not only for his amazing show 99% Invisible, his new show for this year, What Trump Can Teach Us About Con Law, but also for creating and curating Radiotopia and all the great shows that are on that network. I think that Roman Mars is probably is huge. Not only, and also, like you were saying, is a great example to other podcasters to how to present, how to be inspired, and everything too. So I think that Roman Mars would definitely be high up on the list.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, he made my top 4.
I think our job here is to present the cases for a few, because ultimately we happen to be people who listen to a lot of podcasts and who presumably have a good deal of connections in the podcast world. And then there are going to be people listening to this podcast and who are going to look forward to the outcome of the podcast awards. But Mount Rushmore is more of a collective decision, right? So what I thought when I was choosing my people for Mount Rushmore was, these are people who stand out to me, and maybe I can convince a few more people that, for example, Sam Sanders rocks, and then maybe more people want Sam Sanders up on Mount Rushmore. So maybe we all just argue for our picks.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is all subjective. There's no real data behind it. We're just kind of presenting our cases. Right. So I really like how you phrase that, Arielle.
Yeah, that sounds great to me as well. So, Arielle, it sounds like Sam Sanders is who you're pushing for?
Oh, my God. Yeah, it does sound like that. And it's true. Yeah, I first of all, I think what goes into being somebody who's up on Mount Rushmore is not only that their podcast is great, but it's that their presence is something that you look forward to. So Sam, I don't even know him personally. I'm talking about him like he's my friend. Maybe he'll reach out to me after this.
Isn't he all our friends?
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying, is that he's great on Twitter. He likes every comment that you pose to him, and he'll even reply in a way that's friendly, in a way that's, what I think the podcast community can and should give to the people who consider themselves to be in it. So that's why Sam Sanders is on it for me. And then to boot, his show is extremely innovative. That was my pick for most innovative show. There's always new things going on. And what a great way to recap the week's news.
I like it. And Phoebe, how about you? Who would you argue for?
I'm going to return to Paul F. Tompkins. And I am so surprised that I'm defending the white guy here. But as far as both styled like oldie-timey radio podcasts or creative and innovative ideas, like he used to have this show called the Dead Authors Podcast, where he would he would have lots of different very funny guests come on and portray a author from history, and he would interview them through his time machine. He's so good at world building. He does it every week in his weekly podcast, Spontaneous Nation, which is front-loaded with an interview and back-loaded with a lot of often pretty good improv with a lot of his improv friends. Like Arielle said, I know it's going to be a good episode of Comedy Bang Bang if he is there. And his work on Thrilling Adventure Hour, which,
oh my God, so good.
As Frank and Sadie Doyle, is an old-timey style radio show that's actually performed usually at Largo at the Cornet in front of a live audience. So he's also amazing live. Actually, I think a lot of the Dead Authors podcast is also live too. So he's a showman, but he's also often either the first or the third guest on new shows, particularly new comedy shows. I remember he did a really great episode of The Hilarious World of Depression. And he's always a good guest. He's very clever and creative, and honestly has incredible characters for all of his advertising. He's the only show he's advertising like I know to listen to, because if he's not in a character voice, he's so exasperated and like doing it in an airport lounge that he like is losing his mind. So either way, it's going to be funny. And anyway, I think he deserves it because he didn't get his start on radio per se. He is like thoroughly a podcaster in all of his endeavors, and he's successfully pivoted improv, which is something I care about, into a successful show. It's had over 100 episodes. So.
Have you seen either Mr. Show with Bob and David or With Bob and David on Netflix? Okay, cool. You're a fan of that.
I haven't seen With Bob and David, but I've seen Mr. Show.
Very cool. I love that pick. I support that pick very much. For me, I think I'm not going to throw this one out from left field because nobody's mentioned it yet, but I would support and argue for Marco Arment, who is the host of the Accidental Tech podcast, as well as Under the Radar. Both are about Apple and Mac development and tech stuff. And also the host of Top 4 with his wife, Tiffany Arment, about ostensibly about picking the top 4 of whatever random topic they pick about, whether it's Weezer songs or pumpkin spice flavored treats, when they usually just go on rants and talk about whatever. But he's also the creator of Overcast, which is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others that I see online, the best third-party podcast app for iOS. I love Overcast so much because I am able to listen to so many more podcasts than I would ever be able to, because the speed adjustments don't hamper the audio quality, which really matters a lot to me when I'm listening to a podcast. I want to be able to hear everything that's going on, especially if I'm speeding it up. I don't want to lose all that audio quality. But secondly, the smart speed feature, which a lot of other players have, where they reduce the silences. Overcast was first and I think best to market with that feature. And they have a little tally in the settings where it tells you like how much time you've saved by reducing all that silence. And my tally is over 800 hours at this point of saved time. And that's that many more podcasts I've been able to listen to because I use this app. And so I'm just so thankful for it that Marco Arment absolutely has to be my nomination for.
That was a great natural ad too. It fit perfectly into the show. Good job.
If only. I am on the beta, but I can't talk about
No, that was good. I think you're definitely in the top like 0.0001% of podcast super users by just your sheer consumption rate.
Yeah, I love that new the Knight Foundation report that just came out about super listeners and how a super listener listens to 13 podcasts a week, and that
is nothing.
I know, right?
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, I'm curious. Let's go around. How many podcasts a week does everybody listen to?
I don't even know how to answer that.
Oh my God, hard to say. Depending. I live in LA traffic. I don't even say I live in LA. I just live in the traffic. So I do get a lot of podcast time. If I'm working from home, I'll probably listen to 8 or 9 a day because that's, me walking to the coffee shop. Like I said, Up First and The Daily are my quick morning podcasts. But then if I'm driving, I'm easily in traffic for 2 hours throughout the day.
LA.
Yeah, it's fun. It's so fun. One day it'll be a great city, but for now we're just
one day.
We'll meet back at the 2028 Olympics and everything will be figured out. But until then, it has spurred my love of podcasts. And I think I probably listen to like 15, 16 podcasts a day if I'm in traffic.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
Depressing, but good.
I'm probably the least of the four of us. My day job, I'm dealing with words all day. And unfortunately, I'm not good enough at multitasking to listen to words. So I can't even listen to music really without being distracted. So I probably put in about 3.5 hours of podcasts a day. So it's hard to really nail down a number of specific podcasts because the ones I like range from, an hour and a half to 15 minutes.
That makes sense. How about you, Phoebe?
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to I couldn't even put a number on a week though, because I listen to so many multiple times. I have no idea. Although I think when I was using Overcast, I feel like I hit 1,000, but I'm not sure. And I deleted it. I paid money and actually got casts, which is really great. But when I was using Overcast, I loved that little number. I felt so accomplished.
Yes, absolutely.
I would say, yeah, probably. I also work with words, but I'm careless with them. So I listen while I'm at my desk usually. So I probably get like 5 hours of listening a day total.
You're just more talented, not careless.
Thank you. Thank you.
What speed does everybody listen at?
I listen at 1.8 speed with Smart Speed on. How about you?
I can only do 1.5. And lately with the new app that I've been using, which is Castbox, this is not an advertisement. I just really like it. You can do 1.25, which I've been enjoying.
I'm old fashioned and just do 1x.
Ooh.
I know.
The app I use is called Casts, and it lets you have different settings for different shows. So shows that I know have a lot of production value in them that aren't just talk straight. I have at their one because I feel like a lot of thought is put into the sound design of certain episodes, and I don't want to screw with it or else I lose what makes it great audio. But for like shows that are mostly just dialoguing, those are about 1.3.
That makes sense.
Brendan, you're up. I know your numbers. I've heard them before, so I'm prepared.
Yeah. So, going off of Phoebe, what you just said, I also have different settings for specific podcasts. Like if it's a music podcast or some audio dramas like the Bright Sessions, I'll have specific settings for them that are usually like 1.1 or 1.2, just because I want to cram that much more in. But yeah, typically it's at 1.8 speed. I have the privilege of owning my own remodeling company where I can just put my headphones on, block out all the other noise, and just listen to podcasts 9 to 10 hours a day. Between the length of time and the extra speed that I'm doing, I average 24 podcasts a day. It was my New Year's resolution this year to log every podcast I was listening to in a spreadsheet. It took way too much time and was taking so much time out of my day to stop what I was doing working and log everything. So I stopped after about 4 months. So but looking back at the data, I peaked at about 33 podcasts in a day. But yeah, my average was about 24. And that's including podcasts like Accidental Tech Podcast and the talk show and other things that are like 3 hours long. So it's not all just like 15-minute podcasts. Like,
do you find that you absorb everything when you listen to 33 podcasts a day? That's why I imagine logging it was important.
The logging helped in a way to show me what I did and didn't retain from the podcast I was listening to. And actually, as part of it, I was also trying to communicate more with my wife. So I was sharing with her at the same time all of the podcasts I was listening to and kind of giving her a recap of that. And so that really helped me process, like, how much am I getting? How much am I retaining? There's definitely times where I know consciously in the moment that I'm tuning out this podcast that I'm listening to. But at the same time, it feels like I'm hanging out with my friends. So I just like hearing their voices in my head as I'm cutting a piece of wood or doing whatever. So
I get that.
Yeah, I don't retain everything from all the podcasts for sure, but I love the breadth that I'm able to hear and experience way more than I ever would. I feel like on days when I'm not able to listen to podcasts, I feel like I'm just looking at the world through a tunnel, and I'm so closed off from everything in the world that it's really sad and lonely.
Brendan, you didn't actually know this, but this was just an elaborate scheme. It's an intervention. It's going to give a podcast problem. So
we're really worried about you.
We're for you.
Come back to us, buddy.
Thank you for being here and helping me with my problem. Okay, so that was a fun tangent. We'll get back to maybe the Mount Rushmore here. I think currently our top standing is Kevin, is Roman Mars your nomination, or
yeah? Well, I think I threw out 3 names. So Roman, Helen Zaltzman, and Bill Simmons, the 3, and my 4th would be Terry Gross.
Radio.
So I played it kind of safe. Didn't throw any wild cards out there, but yeah, those are my 4. All 4 have a few things in common. I really admire everything they do. I think they push the boundaries of podcasts further. I think they're excellent storytellers. And as podcasts grows as a medium, I feel like these are the people that you point to new podcast listeners to check out, to give it a try, so you can see a sampling of the breadth of really what's out there.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, for me, out of your 4, Roman Mars definitely stands out as the one I would share above the rest. What does everybody else think about Kevin's shortlist and who should be in the top 4 collectively?
I'm into Roman Mars because I think when you ask a lot of people what podcast they listen to, 99% Invisible is a pretty easy. It's mentioned a lot, first of all. And if you're trying to get your friends to listen to podcasts, 99% Invisible is one that's often mentioned because it's easily digestible and also shocking. I mean, the stories are so amazing, and I think offer a really good insight into what podcasts can provide. So I think for a lot of people, Roman Mars is their first introduction to podcasts. So yeah, I'm totally comfortable having him up there on Mount Rushmore.
Agreed. Well, yeah. So I don't know how I feel about this, but right now our founding fathers are Roman Mars, Sam Sanders, Paul F. Tompkins, and Marco Arment.
What happened to Helen?
Yeah, where's Helen?
What happened to Helen there? Come on.
Oh, I will. Okay. I like having Helen Zaltzman on there too. Okay. Well, then who should be bumped off?
Well, I think Marco only has
Marco.
1 pick.
Yeah, who's
captain? It's thrust him on.
Okay. All right. I will move Marco down,
Marco.
and he is bumped off.
Sorry, Marco. Brendan really lobbied hard, but
We'll tweet at you later.
majority
make
wins.
you feel better.
All right. So Roman Mars, Sam Sanders, Paul F. Tompkins, and Helen Zaltzman. How do we feel about that?
I love it.
It's a good list.
I would hang that painting.
Yeah, we need somebody with good Photoshop skills to really make this real corny.
All right, cool. I think that's a good list. I think
I'm very happy Joe Rogan didn't make it.
Yeah, way to go, everyone.
Yes.
Real proud of us.
Yes. I have two friends who have been pressuring me to get into Joe Rogan, and I'm just starting to kind of enjoy it.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, man, the first episode of his that was pushed on me was his interview with Alex Jones, and man, that was brutal.
Why did you do that to yourself?
I don't know. I don't know, because I like this friend, and it was just, that was way too hard. I didn't finish it. There's been more episodes that have been suggested to me with the woman who recently left the Westboro Baptist Church, and they talked about her coming to realize how she was being not necessarily brainwashed, but having her vision limited, and how actually Twitter was the way that she was able to open her eyes and get out of that environment was supremely fascinating. But anyways, I am not advocating for Joe Rogan to be on the Mount Rushmore of podcasting for sure. I like our list of Roman Mars, Sam Sanders, Paul F. Tompkins, and Helen Zaltzman, all great contributions to podcasting as a whole, and also this year. I mean, Roman Mars, Sam Sanders both have new podcasts this year. Helen Zaltzman has been going strong. I think Paul F. Tompkins was started either last year or the year before.
Definitely the year before. But he had 100 episodes this year.
Okay. Oh, nice. Very cool.
Phoebe, I think it was you that brought up your pick for most innovative being Ear Hustle.
I did.
And when I originally filled out the nomination list, I did not put Ear Hustle as most innovative. I put them as best new podcast. But hearing them as most innovative really kills my nomination, blows it out of the water. So it'd be kind of interesting if everybody has time to just go around and discuss some of the nominations for that.
Yeah, Arielle, why don't you go ahead? What did you pick for most innovative?
Well, I did pick It's Been a Minute, which I mentioned before as, I love how there are different games in each episode and how having different people on makes it so that each game is different every week. But I want to throw out a different one for most innovative. And actually, I want to highlight kids podcasts for this one, because I've been finding lately that there are, there's so much content out there, and some of it is bad and some of it is wonderful. And the stuff that's wonderful will change our world. I really believe that. I was recently talking to a friend, and she's a teacher, and I was asking her, do you use podcasts in the classroom? And she said she does not, because a lot of her students are learners that need to write. They can't just listen. And I was saying that I think a lot of my vision for the way podcasts are going is that there can be a way for us to be able to listen and still absorb all that information. And I don't know what the link is yet, but I want to figure it out. So there's an app called Kids Listen that highlights a lot of content created especially for kids. And the podcast that I want to talk about is called Brains On. We featured it in one of our newsletters for kids recently for Earbuds. And not only was it fun for me as an adult, but I could see it being really interesting for kids too. And it didn't feel like it was talking down to me as somebody who already knows what oxygen is.
I'd love to piggyback off of that. For the best kids / family podcast, I put down The Unexplainable Disappearance of Mars Patel. And I like it because out of all of the fiction radio play style shows that I've heard for kids, that one's one that actually has middle school kids voicing the parts, and that and it is really good, and it makes it a lot less insane. I don't know. When I listen to some of the fiction kids podcasts, I feel like I'm going insane sometimes. It's like bubblegum for your ears, and it's really engage. But this is funny and very middle school cool, and I really like it, and it's a mystery, and so I don't know. That was my top kids pick.
Super cool.
But I second the innovation that's happening for kids is like definitely where the money for this industry is going to be pivoting, I think. As you know, people with disposable incomes spend that on their children.
Yeah, going completely 180 from kids programming for most innovative. What I actually put in the nominations list was a self plug for my own show. Nobody asked for this. It's a music podcast where we say stuff wrong and then correct it, and we also challenge each other to do covers of pop songs. But because I thought it was pretty clever. But what I actually think my nomination should be is S-Town, considering that they took the novel format and made it into a podcast series that personally I feel like blew every other podcast I'd heard out of the water narratively. And so, yeah, that would be my pick for most innovative, considering that they made such a different format for storytelling in the podcast.
I think also the drop that they did, the way that they dropped all of the episodes at once and labeled them chapters, made it really more like a novel than even serial was. I think that you're right. As far as like playing with the medium, they definitely were deliberate in making it novelistic.
So going off that release cycle, my original pick for most innovative, and feel free to eye roll with this, was Binge Mode, the Game of Thrones podcast. What they did, if you're unfamiliar, is they released an episode, a podcast episode for every episode of Game of Thrones, releasing seasons at a time every Monday for 6 consecutive weeks.
What do they talk about? Every episode?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so if you're familiar with Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire, like fan community, they are diehard and they have theories up the wazoo, and they are very, I can't even think of a term, evangelical, I guess. And basically the hosts of Binge Mode are extremely knowledgeable. And after talking with the producer, they spent so much time fact checking and being perfectionists because they knew any wrong detail, kind of slip up in a theory recital, basically would lose all credibility among this crowd. So the episodes start at like 25 minutes with like the first season and progressively get longer, to the fact that season 6, each episode was over an hour, which is really surprising considering they're going off about an hour of source content. But yeah, if you're at all a Game of Thrones fan, what they were able to do was really innovative. And similar to S-Town, their releasing schedule kind of played on that Netflix of everything model where people can binge at their own rate and don't need to go off any sort of release cycle.
That's cool. That reminds me, considering that they have episodes longer than the actual source material, that reminds me of The Incomparable, which it's like kind of a nerd-focused show. They do a lot of either comic books or movie reviews and things like that. It's a whole panel of it's probably like 8 or 10 different hosts that rotate on different episodes, and they have a lot of them that are really obsessed with Star Wars. When the new Star Wars movies started coming out, they would do an episode on each trailer as it was leading up to the new movie being released, and they would talk for 45 minutes to an hour and a half on a 2.5 minute trailer or whatever it was.
That would infuriate me. That sounds infuriating.
It was super fun. I enjoyed it.
Other ones getting some votes that have been mentioned, just so we can kind of round it out.
Yeah.
36 questions. I know we talked about that. This group wasn't, I think, a huge fan, but what they did was pretty interesting. It was definitely unique. Welcome to Night Vale got a bunch.
Not for 2017.
Right.
You know what felt big this year was 30 for 30.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, sure.
Podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it got a lot of shout because it's a sports podcast, but
relatable.
It doesn't feel like a sports podcast because it's much more narrative. So for me, like when I try to convince friends to listen to podcasts, who are very into sports, it's easy for me to talk about 30 for 30 and explain why that would be a good choice for them. So, definitely
good pick.
One to be mentioned.
Yeah, they were on the list as well. But other than that, it was kind of the who's who. Reply All got a lot in innovative. I think that's maybe because they kind of went tangential to their tech focus with the episodes Long Distance, right? The Indian call scamming company. But yeah, I think we covered a lot that were listed here at least.
What are your guys' desert island podcasts?
Oh yeah, nice.
I'm really curious because if you're alone on an island and you can only hear one host's voice, I feel like you'd have to be either really ready to hate their voice or you gotta love them like so much. I don't know. This one was hard for me.
But you have so much power here in your decision because some podcasts are really the one person compelling storyteller. And then others are people who bring on incredible guests and who could, if you're stuck on an island, keep you busy for years and keep you learning for years. So I guess it's your choice nowadays. There's so many political podcasts out there. Do you want to, if you're stuck on a desert island, keep hearing about these politics going on, or do you want to, resign yourself? Not even resign yourself. Do you want to give in to stories? So I think for me, actually, it's Strangers with Leah Tao. I recently got into it, but I loved the episode called Do You Like My Little Lies? I was enthralled, and it's just about like a dead body. And I imagine that more stories are like that. And I also got the chance to hear Leah Tao speak at Podcast Movement, and to see the people behind it is incredible. So now that I have that, I feel like I could take her to a desert island.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I started listening to her when she had the series about talking to Trump voters, and man, it was eye-opening at the time for me because definitely in a bubble. She also had another episode, I think it was either her most recent or second to most recent, where she goes back to some people that she had talked to before. I can't remember exactly, but there's a correspondent or somebody that goes out and talks to some very Republican voters. And what was super interesting, they see the same problems and they have the same arguments until the last moment where they switch and they go from being completely understandable to thinking the solution is something totally separate from what my reality would be. So, but yeah, that's a great podcast as a desert island. Kevin, how about you?
This one's so tough because it's like the desert island food, right? You're going to get sick of something and just really committing, and somebody that likes to change their decision back and forth. Right now, if you're asking me, I think I would say Reply All.
Nice.
Because of their level of storytelling and production value. And though it's not rapid response, you need to listen to this now, it still is timely. And I'm still relatively young. I'm on the internet all day, every day. And their yes, yes, no segment still teaches me something new. I'm always typically in the no section. So it kind of lets me stay current.
Absolutely. For me, it was actually this is probably the easiest question on the whole list because it's hands down Harmontown. I've been a fan since episode 7, and they're somewhere in the hundreds. I don't remember. The episodes are almost always 2 hours, so it's a plenty of content per episode. I have at one point they took a month break or month and a half break. And they were at episode like 200 or something. So I just decided to go back from episode 1 and re-listen to the whole series.
Oh my God.
And it was fantastic. It was just as good. They had topical stuff at the time. So it was kind of interesting in that, it was dated, but it was still super, super good. They have tons of guests, super funny, lots of commentary, and also self-deferential humor, which I enjoy listening to. So I think, Phoebe, you're the only one that hasn't mentioned theirs.
Yeah. Well, my answer just came down to what do I re-listen to gleefully and happily, like we were just talking about. And I will go back and listen to old episodes of Comedy Bang Bang with my favorites, like Jason Mantzoukas or Harris Whittle's episodes that, and because there's honestly just almost a decade of them, I could really go on forever. And it is the show that it's probably the one that I wait to come out, and like days that I don't have it to listen to, I'm a little bit sadder. But practicality wise, if I was alone on a desert island, I would have to, this is a totally weird one, but it's also new this year. I have developed this habit where I cannot fall asleep unless LeVar Burton is reading to me. And so that was my second pick on this one. I would like it to be Comedy Bang Bang, but out of necessity, if I have insomnia on a desert island, I'm just gonna be one of those two: LeVar Burton reads and or Comedy Bang Bang.
That's fantastic.
Both awesome. Great choices.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for being on the show with me and talking about your favorite podcasts, your least favorite podcasts, and figuring out who's going to be the Mount Rushmore. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, where should they go?
To get a hold of me, easiest way is to go to earbudspodcastcollective.org, and all of my contact information is there. Can't wait to see you.
Awesome.
Kevin_Goldberg at Twitter, and then Discover_Pods Twitter, or Kevin@discoverpods.com for email.
If you're at all interested in anything we've talked about, you should totally talk about it on Facebook in the group I run and manage called the New York Times Podcast Club. Just start your own posts about whatever the hell you want to talk about. It doesn't matter, as long as it's about podcasts. There's a lot of nerds that are hungry to chat and find new things to listen to. And if you want my aforementioned Twitter, serious and sad,
yes,
is at Phoebe Lett.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining me, and happy podcasting.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Again, I want to say thank you to Arielle, Phoebe, and Kevin for coming on and talking about the 2017 Discover Pods Awards. Thank you for listening. Final voting is now open for the Discover Pods Awards, so head to discoverpods.com or use the direct link in the show notes to the voting page. Unlike the nominations, this is one vote per person, so make that count. And I'm really happy to see that a Podcast Advocate Network show made it into the finalists. I'm going to be at PodCon in Seattle, December 9 and 10, 2017. Tweet at me. I'm at the Pod Playlist if you want to meet up. I'll also be at the unofficial audio drama meetup with Michelle Nicolaisen, the writer and creator of Unplaced, a fellow Podcast Advocate Network podcast that I happily provide the editing and music for. We hope to see you there. audibletrial.com/podcast playlist will get you a free audiobook, and it'll support the show. There's no cost to you at all. There's no downside. You just get a free audio thing, like a podcast, but longer and more thought out and edited. And it makes a big difference in supporting this show. It's a labor of love. Getting you a free audiobook helps a lot. audibletrial.com/podcast playlist. Link in the show notes. Thanks to podchaser.com for having such a great podcast discovery platform. Thank you to Podient for hosting Podcast Playlist and all the great shows on the Podcast Advocate Network. And thank you to you for listening. In the immortal words of Mike Burkett from NoFX, the People's Revolution is going to be a podcast.
Podcast Playlist.